Welcome to Perspectives El Paso. I'm Professor Leon Blevins, Professor of Government at El Paso Community College. Here we are at the end of September of 2015. We're right in the middle of a period known as Hispanic Heritage Month here in El Paso, which is from the middle of September to the middle of October. Just about a week ago, I believe it was a Wednesday evening, my wife Shannon and I went to hear a couple of speakers here in this very building where this taping is taking place. And the program was about a man named Matt Perez, a retired FBI agent, who sued the FBI because of racial discrimination. And he got like 310 other FBI agents for a class action suit suing their own agency. Now that's a scary proposition, I can tell you. One of those agents, good friend of Matt Perez, named Sam Martinez, he recently did a book about this particular case that was back in the 1980s. And so we heard these two men talk about their experiences with the FBI. Plus one of the lawyers that took the case, a Mr. Silva, I believe it was, that took the case into federal court and won the case in just a matter of a few days when it began its presentation. Well, Matt Perez had to go back to his home. He wasn't able to stay around in El Paso. But Sam Martinez and his lovely wife Ruth stayed, and they're in our studio today. So, Sam.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good to have you on the program. People I've told I was doing this taping today are already saying, when is it going to be shown? When is it going to be shown? I want to see that. I want to know about the FBI.
Well, I'm excited to be here. The FBI is a great organization, but we had a time when individuals within the FBI took abuse of power and decided to go ahead and continue with this lawsuit. And I thought that if I was the head of an agency and there was 311 agents out of more than 3/4 of the Hispanic agents saying that there's an issue, that they should have looked at it a little closer and studied it rather than deciding to go ahead and take it to court.
Well, our culture has always had a lot of discrimination. And I mentioned on this show before, I had occasion one time a student asked me, Mr. Blevins, what are our biggest problems in this country? And I started off by saying discrimination in all of its forms, and then drug abuse in all of its forms. And so it's a part of our culture. And some of you were willing to fight on it. I want you to tell the audience about the book, Systemic Evil, Matt Perez versus the FBI. And you want to give a website or a telephone number or anything so people can check on this?
Well, it is on Amazon.com. It's available through them. If you Google Systemic Evil, Matt Perez versus the FBI under Amazon,
okay,
the book will come up. And I've been fortunate to have good ratings on it. They even from ex-FBI agents, which I thought I was going to get some flack because of some of the statements that are in there. But it's all court records. Everything that comes out that's negative is basically testimony that came out from the trial.
Well, Matt mentioned in the meeting the other night that he asked some that did not join the suit because of fear of retaliation. I'm sure you heard that a lot, saying, why should I do that?
Well, that's one of the reasons why I dedicated the book to the 311 agents, Matt and the 310 other agents, was because we took a risk in speaking out against the FBI, because when you speak out against a powerful organization, there's retaliation, and the history was if we filed an EEO complaint and it didn't go to where it was supposed to go, that the logic of the investigation wasn't there, and that's why the judge ruled the EEO program was bankrupt in their EEO policy and in investigations.
Okay. But
it is something that discrimination for me needs to be addressed. And when Judge Lucius Bunton III ruled that it was systemic discrimination and bankrupt in their EEO policies and investigations, I was going to put systemic discrimination, but then I started thinking more about the word discrimination. And for me, discrimination is a choice. And these managers had choices to make, and the choices and the acts that they took against Matt and others were, from my perspective, evil. And so that's the reason why I named the book Systemic Evil, And then also Matt Perez was in the seminary for 7 years, and he was studying to be a priest. And towards his last years, he said he went up to the headmaster and he said, "I'm falling in love with women I don't even know." So the priest told him, "It's time for you to go someplace else and look elsewhere." And he did. And fortunately, he joined the FBI as a clerk, and then rose up to the special agent in charge of the San Juan office. And then that's where the issues began. And then after that, he went to Los Angeles as an ASAC, and then El Paso as an ASAC, and that's where we filed the class action lawsuit.
I'm sure the audience wants to know, what were some of the specific things that were discrimination against you and him and the other agents? What were being done? What were the things being done?
In his case, the FBI has what they call major cases, and that's like the Boston bombing, 9/11, Ruby Ridge, where something happens and it gets media attention, and the FBI decides to send resources, manpower, and equipment to solve these case immediately because it needs attention. Well, Matt was in San Juan. He had a major investigation against the police department. It was 40 police officers they were planning to indict, and then you had a bus that was a Navy bus that had sailors there, and they were machine gunned, and two of them died, 10 were injured, and four of them were women. And fortunately, one of the bus driver was shot when one of the sailors actually rushed up to the bus and drove the bus away to get out of harm's way, and actually ended up saving a lot of lives because he moved the bus out of the way. We had a air base that was 11 airplanes were destroyed. There was 25 bombs placed on the base, and then they had another ship that was bombed. That was a supply ship that was delivering food and rations to.
And this was all in Puerto Rico?
All in Puerto Rico. And so you had 4 major cases going on, and he was asking for resources, and they basically held him back. And then when the inspection came down back to, we have what they call an inspection staff that goes to each office every 2 years to inspect if you're investigating your cases properly, if any resources are missing, if you're using your manpower wisely. And so they had an inspection go down there, and the inspection actually found him that he was lacking leadership. So that's when they moved him out. But the true fact, and what Judge Bunton found, and was that he wasn't getting the resources and the proper support that he should.
But he got the blame for it.
He got the blame for it. And then when he went to Los Angeles, because he was transferred from headquarters to Los Angeles. Usually the SAC, the special agent in charge of the office, has a choice of who I want to have as my assistant special agents in charge. That was the policy. Well, Matt wasn't his choice, so he goes in there, and Matt comes in and he says, "Well, I've been in LA before. I know who's working and who's not. I've got a good relationship with the police department. I've got I know what's going on." And the SAC says, "I'm going to overlook the fact that you're Mexican. Your office is over there. I'm in charge." And so that, from that point on, he started and he set up filed 11 EEO complaints that he wasn't able to get his work done, and they went nowhere. And from that point on, they ended up transferring him to El Paso, which was a smaller office, so it was actually a demotion.
And he realized, document everything.
He did, and one of the issues there in Los Angeles was that Richard W. Miller, he was a first FBI spy. Matt recognized that he wasn't doing his work. He had lost the security key to a top secret facility. He actually left it.
You mean he was spying for Soviet Union or something?
For the Russians, yes.
Okay.
He had lost his key. He was selling Amway from the trunk of his car. He was overweight. He wasn't doing his work. So Matt called him in and said, "Hey, look, I'm going to either, we need to fix this, or I need to put you on some kind of a disability, or get you out of here." And the SAC at that time brought him in for religious counseling and said, "Matt, you stay away from him." And so then that's when he ended up getting caught as a spy. And then Matt went to testify, because the defense for Richard Miller called Matt to testify for Richard W. Miller, not really for him, but for about the facts. And so it ended up that the SAC then filed perjury charges, because Matt told the public that Richard Miller had a shoddy work record. So it was just, Matt could not get anywhere from.
He wanted to be a good agent, and they weren't letting him be a good agent.
Well, he knew what was right and wrong.
Right.
He studied for it. He was raised from a good humble family. He studied for it, and so it was kind of sad to see that the FBI, who's supposed to do what's right and wrong, didn't do what was right in his case.
Okay, now let's move to the writing of the book. We could go case after case after case that he had experiences with. What about when you decided to write the book? You met with him and you approached it. How did you approach writing the book? What was the hardest part to write and the easiest part to write?
Well, the hardest part, Tony Silva, I dedicated the book to also, he passed away early because of cancer. So I came back to his funeral, and when I got back to his funeral, he didn't get the recognition that I thought he should have. The priest got up and said his sermon, and then people got up and said goodbye to the family. And I sat there and I said, "This is a great guy."
And what was his position?
He was one of the attorneys that represented the Hispanics.
Okay.
And so that's when I asked Matt, and out of deference to Matt, Matt had talked about a movie and Matt had talked about a book, and out of deference to Matt, I just sat back and said, I'll let him handle it. But then after the funeral, I said, what's going on with this story that should be published? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, he was waiting on money from the movie and doing this and that and so forth. So I said, let's get started on it. So getting the court records was a problem. The FBI has a process of getting documents from them, and I was fortunate to come to the El Paso courts and ask the court if they had the trial documents. And the chief clerk went down into the dungeon where they had them all boxed up, and he came back and he said, "You know what? This is a great case. This is one of the better cases for El Paso. This should be digitized." And so he said, "I'm going to go ahead and advertise to get this digitized, unless you want the documents right away." Well, for me, it was easier to get a CD of the documents rather than boxes and boxes of documents, which I would have had to scan also.
So that took a few months?
That took several months. And then the book actually took 5 years. And when I started writing it, I was doing it by the section of the trial. The 1 week where the Hispanic plaintiffs testified for 5 days, and then the counter testimony from the FBI management and FBI agents for the last 4 days. But then I started saying, well, looking at it, I was giving the FBI agents equal time, basically talking about their education, talking about who they were, and I said, that's not important. It was important for me to show that the Hispanics were well qualified, were elite managers before they got into the bureau, were police officers, military captains, officers, and such. So I decided to go ahead and give everybody a chapter of the people that testified. And John Yelchek and John Hoos and Eileen Ikagami were people that worked in the Bureau that actually testified for the Hispanic class, basically saying the truth, and there was retaliation against them also.
Any highlights of doing that research? I like to write, I like to research. What was a highlight of doing that research?
Well, the court testimonies, some of them are dry because they take a long time to get to a specific answers. But I ended up, I had to overcome that, and by that I had to say, well, I'm going to have fun doing this. So I started giving people nicknames, bad names and good names, and names I can't,
memorable names,
names I can't mention here. But I started giving them names, and I started, getting them personalities, and some Greek gods and under Greek mythology and so forth. But I started doing that, and that got me over the hump of doing it. But then it's redacting over 30,000 pages into 300 is a difficult task. But I thought I got the meat of it, and I love the FBI. I didn't want to portray it as a bad organization. It's a vital organization to this country, but it was the agents that were making decisions. In my case, I was assigned to Mexico City, and I got involved in a gun situation with what they call the primo hermano of one of the presidents. Mm-hmm. And he was giving me information about drugs in Mexico, and he decided to during the earthquake, decided that this is a good time for me to leave and hide out and get out. So the boss I had no real experience with drugs and really didn't want to get involved and wouldn't allow me to give him any money to get out of the country. So we got involved into an incident in which nothing happened, but then a year later, this source went to work with Customs and worked with DEA, and then gave them some information that got misquoted in the end, and then it said that I was running guns in Mexico City, which was completely false. Mm-hmm. So then my boss wrote a report, and he knew he had knowledge of this incident before, but then he removed himself from the knowledge, and then he accused me of criminal activity, lack of candor, and insubordination. Well, I knew I could prove that I conducted no criminal activity, but the insubordination and lack of candor charge, I said, well, the FBI, I want you to polygraph me. And the 1, 2, 3 levels above my boss said, no, we're not going to polygraph you. I said, don't you want to get to the truth? And they didn't, and that sort of broke my heart because of here's an organization that for the first 14 years I never witnessed a predetermined or incomplete investigation, and now because it was involved with management, I was seeing something different.
And this is your government. This is
our government. This is our government, because who owns the FBI? It's the taxpayer and the people of the United States. It wasn't. And when you read John Yelchek's chapter, he speaks about it. Who is the FBI, and who are these people? And it was Hoover decided to come in and run the organization to fight crime. And Hoover gets a lot of criticism, but when push comes to shove, and we had to go penetrate politicians, we had to go penetrate police officers, county officials to investigate civil rights violations in southern United States. We did our job, and a lot of that was Hoover's leadership. He was but it wasn't Hoover's FBI either. The FBI belongs to the public.
Good. Tell me about how this affected family situations. I know you were moving from place to place, and Matt was moving from place to place. Wasn't this also a burden on your families?
It was. In my case, I got bounced. I got demoted because the bureau wouldn't listen to me. So then I had to appeal my case through the Merit System Protection Board. But when I appealed my case, my wife's mother was having some physical problems, so they allowed me to stay in El Paso for 3 months before I went to L.A. They had demoted me and sent me to L.A. where the beast was gonna be there. So I went to El Paso, and I opened up an informant. I was doing their paperwork, and John Yelchek and Matt Bettis were here in this office, and they asked me to stay in El Paso, and if I would stay. And I said, well, I'll consider a demotion to stay in El Paso and work here in El Paso and have that on my record. And so they went ahead and wrote a proposal back to headquarters and said, and asking me to stay, and they said no. So they moved me from I was here in El Paso for 3 months, and I was still appealing my case through the Merit System Protection Board. So my mom, my wife, and my 2 kids were with me in L.A. We went down there to L.A. and I even told the SAC or the office there that I was going to be there temporarily because I knew I was going to win this case. And so that they moved me back there, and then they moved me back to El Paso, and then they moved me back to. So in 1 year, my kids were in 3 different school systems. Oh, wow. So it was difficult for them. And there was, Matt spoke about his divorce.
Last Wednesday he mentioned the trauma in his own family that led to divorce.
Guillermo Mireles went through a divorce. There were several people that went through a divorce, and none of the Hispanic agents were heroes for taking part of this, but because we didn't really put our life up there. But emotionally, when you're pressured with the stress of trying to get your job done, when you're trying to get all your work completed, and trying to be fair, and you've got this pressure where they're piling up legal papers against you, it's difficult for you to do your job. So it's emotionally traumatized. I know that one agent, I don't want to mention his name, but I know one agent really drank quite a bit, and that alcohol has lingered on till today.
Yeah. Well, that cost you money too.
It cost us money, and in my case, I was involved because I had filed an EEO complaint against my boss in Mexico City, and I had participated in the class action lawsuit. It was costing me money, but the effects of it, if I hadn't participated in the lawsuit, and if I had just taken my retirement, if I would have accepted my grade as a grade 13 instead of a grade 15, where I retired, that amount of money, $10,000 a year, keeps adding on to the rest of your life. Right. So discrimination not only hurts you, but it hurts you in the future. It hurts your pocket.
Okay, you mentioned Lucius Button, the judge. Are there any others that you would like to give a special thanks to in this particular interview for those steps along the way?
Well, Lucius Button was a very important person because he loved the FBI. I mean, he used to get cases from the FBI and decide on them, and but he also wasn't afraid of Hispanics. He grew up in Marfa, Texas. His son is going to be at one of my presentations that I give up in Austin next week. Okay. And he said he really thoroughly enjoyed the book. But he was fair. He was fair, and plus William Sessions, who was his partner as a judge in the District of El Paso, was now going to be the head of the FBI. So it was very difficult for him to rule against the FBI. but he did it because we had the documents and we had the truth, and that's why we overcame.
Was William Sessions helpful at all?
William Sessions, I have a part there in William Sessions, and I talk about white-on-white discrimination. We have white-on-white discrimination. Whenever we discuss discrimination in the United States, we always it's always black and white, and or Hispanic and white. But we have women are discriminated against. You have 54% of the women in the population, and yet the salaries are not the same. But you have, I speak about white-on-white discrimination. Director Sessions decided, on the advice of the Department of Justice, not to appeal the case. And the good old boys in the FBI, that's when they went ahead and started nitpicking. I call it nitpicking. He flew to San Francisco and to see his daughter. She was in the San Francisco Ballet, and so he went to see her dance, and but also conducted some other FBI business. Right. And he, in one trip, on the FBI plane. Somebody offered to bring, the firewood, so he brought the firewood back. So they made a big thing about it. that he had a fence built in his personal backyard. Well, I was overseas when I was overseas in Uruguay running the office there. We decided to rent a house, and the house that we had didn't have a fence. So I called up headquarters and said, I want a fence, and this is the kind of fence I wanted, and I never got any flack. Well, all of a sudden, because Sessions didn't appeal the case, this fence is a big issue with the managers, and they're publicizing that he had a personal fence put on his well, he needed security. Plus his wife Alice was, because he was the first president that was really married. His wife was saying, well, I need to go this place, I need to go that place. So agents started complaining about, well, why should we take her shopping, or why should, but you just think about the publicity. If Alice had been kidnapped or killed during that time, it would have.
So petty things were happening.
Petty things were
happening. Well, we're glad you stayed on top of it, and you did not stop in your quest to get the story told.
Well, I was excited to get it out.
I want to say thank you for being here with us today and telling this story for us.
And Professor Leon, I really appreciate it. I think it's a story that needs to go out. People ask me, how many books do you sell? I said, I'm not even keeping track, because I want the story told, because discrimination is so easy to happen in this country, and it's so easy to go from favoritism to other issues.
Systemic evil. Thanks for telling us the story, and thank you for being with us today on Perspectives El Paso. I'm Leon Blevins.